Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andy. I am an alcoholic. Uh, I'm addicted to changing how I feel and not very good at living life on life's terms. I'm excited to be here with you guys today. Since September the 22nd of 2008, I have not found the need to ingest myself with alcohol or any other mind-altering chemicals, and for that, I'm truly grateful. That comes from working a 12-step program and hanging out with guys like y'all, man. I draw a lot of energy and support and comfort from hanging out with other alcoholics and addicts and whoever else is trying to get through life. And I'm truly grateful for all that. I'm excited to have this opportunity to kind of make my, well, I was going to say my interstate debut, but now I see some UKs down there, so maybe my international debut. Man, that's pretty crazy for a guy like me, because I still think that I'm just that guy that was strung out on the trash heap, uh, you know, not fit for love or life or anything else. So it's kind of cool that I can see somebody that I know in this group from down here in Texas. So Amy, it's good to see you. Kind of makes me excited. Yeah, I'll leave how I know Amy between us unless she wants to share. But anyway, so what happened? So I grew up typical Bible Belt family, Christian home, rock solid parents, pillars of the community. But I did have a brother and sister who were into drugs and alcohol and addiction, and they were quite a bit older than I was. I was kind of an accident. I came along at like 10 years after all my siblings. But anyway, my oldest sister and brother were into their addiction, and I kind of grew up watching that, and grew up hating that. And I saw all the things that it did to my family, and I say that to say I grew up with this hatred for anything to do with addiction, and swore that that would never be my life. However, I grew up in rural East Texas, and drinking cold beer is a rite of passage around here. I don't know how it is for other places in the world. So I definitely grew up, uh, running around with my buddies and riding back roads and having keg parties and all that stuff. I kind of laugh about it today that as much as I grew up drinking, and as much as I did get drunk, I wasn't crazy about being drunk, because the addict, the alcoholic in me, when I drank a lot. I never knew how to regulate or moderate. Uh, it was always a lot. So consequently, I got really drunk and I got really sick and I did really stupid things. And I did not necessarily enjoy that. I didn't enjoy hangovers and being told what I did the night before and not remembering it. But, so I kind of skated by early on with that, not getting into too much trouble. Kind of grew up all-American, boy next door football player. Uh, I was kind of the guy that girls wanted to bring home to meet their mom. Not sure that was what I wanted, but that's what I was. Um, anyway, so I grew up pretty normal for the most part. My brother and sister's escapades were kept pretty at a distance from me growing up. My mom and dad made sure of that, and maybe as a result of their perceived failures with my siblings, maybe I got the spoiled end of that deal. I don't know, but I definitely was spoiled. My mother doted on me, and I didn't even know how to make a bed till I got married, wash clothes, anything. And so, that's just another one of those factors that line up to make things difficult for me, right? I had a lot of expectations of how I was supposed to be treated and how life was supposed to look. But what I've learned in my experience through addiction and recovery is that this really is a life problem, and it's about learning how to live life on life's terms. And I was not prepared for that. I really wasn't. When I was 16, my dad died, and my dad and I were close. We were hunting and fishing buddies together, and we worked together a lot, and went to sporting events or whatever. We were tight, and when he died, it definitely was a shock to my system. But on the day of his funeral, I had an uncle come up to me and say, "Well, you're the man of the house now." And I said, "You're right, I am." And I wiped away all my tears, and I don't know that I cried again for the next 25 years. Uh, I got tough, and I started to take care of my mother, and that's who I thought I was supposed to be, and I never really grieved for my father. I just pushed forward, and that's my nature in a lot of ways. I don't. I just keep moving forward. No matter what happens, I've always just kept pushing forward. I don't know how to quit, right? That's a big factor for me too. It's worked for me a lot in my life, but it's also worked against me. And so anyway, I tell that to just say that's kind of setting it up for where I was. I got out of college. I mean, I got out of high school, and I got a great job, so I guess somebody felt sorry for me because my dad died, and I got this really great position with a major company, and I went to school 6 months and worked 6 months, and they paid for me to go to school, and so everything in life just kind of fell in my lap. I thought life was easy. Uh, by the time I turned 20, I had a couple of babies and was married, and by all accounts, and I had it going on. I had a great life. I was making good money. Everything looked really good from the outside looking in, and so I told myself that, I'm doing this thing, man. I've got it. Man, wow, look at me, and uh, all that played into that narcissism that I carried for all them years, that I was special, different, and even after my dad died, my sister and my mom, they basically made me their hero, and I rode that, man. I ate that up, and so a lot of that was naivety, but it played into my addictive nature. And I say this all the time now, man. We're not alcoholics or addicts because of what we put into our bodies. We're addicts because of the way we think. And we just have this addictive mindset, and we tend to think in all or nothing black and white terms, and we tend to have a demand instant gratification, and we tend to make mountains out of molehills and molehills out of mountains, and uh, I certainly qualify for all those addictive traits. I'm eat up with them. So just trying to live my life like that and thinking I had everything going good. I heard a speaker one time say that he thought social acceptance equaled personal recovery. And I love that statement, right? And that's kind of what I had. I had personal acceptance, and really I hadn't had any major issues with any of my drinking up to that point. Even when I had the kids, I kind of stopped for a little while, and that planted that seed in my head, man, that I could always drink and nothing would happen. And I'll say it right now, the worst thing that ever happened to me was I got away with it. And my mind held on to that little moment, that little point, all the way to the bitter end. That I thought I could successfully put chemicals in my body and live a good life. And so I launched on down the road, and was living life, and somewhere in the middle of that, life happens, and you go through a few difficulties and things, and I don't come on here to make excuses about anybody in my life, but my wife is redheaded, and she's tough, and she is headstrong, and she is pretty demanding, and she doesn't mind fighting, and I'm that addict, caregiver, people pleaser. When I got married, I gave myself wholly. I don't know how to moderate, right? I gave all of me to that marriage, and that didn't necessarily come back to me, and I couldn't figure that out. And even when I kind of did figure it out, I didn't know what to do about it. that was a huge piece of me looking at myself and thinking, what the hell are you doing, man? Uh, you're letting this happen and these things be taken away from you, and you're not standing your ground. And I kept waiting on her to play fair. And I told somebody once, I felt like a kid on the playground when you're in the line, they say, okay, let me have a volunteer step forward, and everybody else steps backwards, and you're the only one standing there, right? Well, you're the only one that played that honestly, but you're the one that got picked. And that's kind of how I felt in my marriage and in my life. And the job that I had, man, even though it was a fantastic job and I made good money and I had amazing benefits, and it afforded me a really, really nice life early on, I hated it. I didn't mind the job so much. I was working for the electric company. I was a lineman, and so I built power lines, and I came and got your lights back on during the ice storms, all that good stuff. And I liked being a lineman, but I did not like the company that I worked for. And it's that classic dangle the carrot in front of you and tell you all this lies and build you up, and then nothing ever changes. And I got really bitter about that, and I think looking back now, I was probably taking out a lot of my frustration from home on that company and on that job. And I wasn't scared to voice my opinion at work. And believe me, I said a lot. Uh, every time that I thought they lied to me, I threw a fit. And anyway, so I started losing track of who I was and where I was at. And what I know now, looking back on it, is that I was extremely eroded emotionally. And everybody, I say that, but I want you guys to see how, our disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's also very patient, and things line up, and it's like this perfect storm of events, because remember, I'm anti-drug. I'm never going to do anything like that. And all those neat things that I believed and told myself but those things equated to a false sense of security. And in reality, I was becoming more and more miserable because I wasn't happy at home. I wasn't happy at work. And I would talk about leaving work, and my wife would just throw this horrendous fit because how can you do that? You're our provider, and you're taking care of these kids, and that much was true. And so I just kept toughing it out and going forward and pushing through. And even though I was getting more and more miserable as life goes on, and angry all the time, man. I think I became addicted to anger. That was the one thing that I had that I could intimidate and manipulate with. And, you know, uh, the squeaky wheel gets greased. And so I became the squeaky wheel at work, and I would go home and eat my emotions and go back out to work and let them all out. And so it was just really, you guys can see the crash that's coming, right? I'm losing track of who I was as a person, as a man. It wasn't turning out like I wanted it to, like I thought it was going to. It was, and I couldn't understand it, and I couldn't figure it out. And that part of me that refused to believe that I could mess things up because somehow I'm amazing, and all that was playing into it, and my head's just spinning. And as luck would have it, man, fate would have it, addiction would have it, whatever. I started I had this guy that I worked with that I really looked up to and admired, and I wanted to be like him. Uh, he had a great family, and him and his wife and these beautiful kids, and they lived in a great house, and they went snow skiing every year at Christmas break, and they went somewhere, tropical in the summer to go scuba diving. And man, I thought that was great. And I found out that he was into smoking marijuana, and I was like, man, I don't, that can't be. You just can't smoke marijuana and live a great life. That's impossible. My mama told me, if you smoke marijuana, you're going to sprout horns and grow a tail, and instant felon right there. And so that's the way I believe, and that's how I grew up thinking. And but I kept watching him, and at the same time, I kept getting into deeper and deeper pain. And look, guys, our addiction lives in the primal part of our brain. It's a survival mechanism. And once that survival instinct takes over, your ability to think rationally and logical and make executive decisions goes away. And that was happening to me. And I was getting more and more irrational, and my pain was still increasing. And if you hurt bad enough, long enough, you'll do anything to end that pain. And I'll tell you a quick story on that. At one point in the middle of everything, when it was bad, I checked myself into a mental hospital to make my family think I was getting help. Really, I knew they would just keep me for 3 or 4 days and send me home. While I was there, I met a man, probably in his late 60s, early 70s, kind of like Glenn down there, very distinguished looking, looked like possibly your high school principal or something to that effect, and bank president maybe. And I said, man, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I'm addicted to cocaine. And I said, I don't think so. I know a lot of cocaine addicts, and you don't look like any of those. And he said, no, it ain't like that for me, man. He said, several years ago, a drink machine fell on me and ruptured my pancreas. He said, I'm in tremendous chronic pain all the time. He said, I have a pain management doctor, had a morphine pump, electric shock stimulation. He said, I have great insurance, and my family has money. I've been to the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis, and I even went and learned Tai Chi, trying to learn mind over matter. And he said, came down to it, the only thing that helps me with my pain is cocaine. And he said, I don't care about partying, staying up all night, or anything to do with that lifestyle. I just don't want to hurt. And he said, until they find me a better solution to deal with my pain, I'm going to do cocaine. And that really hit me, man. And I knew right then that I was in trouble, because by that point I had gotten way off into whatever substance I could get my hands on that changed how I felt. It was irrelevant to me. My drug of choice was more. And so I kind of thought, man, I'm screwed. I'll never be able, even though my pain wasn't physical, my pain was emotional. I saw no relief from that. And so, tell that story to say, man, if we're in enough pain, we're going to keep doing something to end that pain. And eventually I got weak, and eventually I tried smoking weed. And, the crazy thing is I didn't even like it. But that opened that door and sent me into, there's no point in telling that story and talking about all these other substances. It's just where I ended up, but it just got darker and darker and spiraling further and further away. I lost that good job, and as bad as I hated that company, when I lost that job, I felt emasculated. That was my manhood, right? I was the provider, and that was the one thing that I still had going for me that was on the good side, and now I don't have that. And the depression that hit after that was just incredible. And what do we do when we get depressed and hurt? We ingest substances, right? And so that just got worse and worse. And this next 5 or 6 year period that just, you can paint a picture in your mind of how ugly and bad that lifestyle and that world gets you. And that's where I was. I was all the way to the point of an IV drug user. I didn't work. I didn't bathe. I didn't care. I just wanted to die, and I didn't have the courage to do that. So I hated myself even more for that. I didn't care about I didn't think about my marriage too much at that point. I didn't care. Whatever. She was no longer an enemy. She was a nothing, because in that world, somebody's either an asset or they're nothing. And she was just nothing. Unless she happened to have money she'd be willing to give me or something like that. So it just kept spiraling deeper and deeper, and I kept hating myself more and more. But one of the cool things is going back to that trip to the mental institution. Not only did I meet that man that told me that story, but I also attended my first AA meeting. And I really went because I'd always heard of it and I wanted to know what it was, and really because I was sick of putting jigsaw puzzles together. Because that's all you did at the insane asylum. And I sat at the table and put jigsaw puzzles together with a little girl that kept repeating the word bubble for hours. And so I went to the meeting, and I walked in, and I expected to see all these disgusting wino derelicts from the street, and that's not what I saw at all. And much like this room, man, they were good looking people. They were healthy and happy and laughing and cutting up, and I was just stunned. And even though that meeting didn't amount to a whole lot as far as my recovery went at that point in my life, because I left that in institution and went straight to the drug house. And I had no intentions of getting clean while I was there. But I did remember that meeting. And so, I started to say how I ended up as an addict. Our disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. So is our higher power. So is God. And the way that my God orchestrated everything to get me out of that is pretty phenomenal. And I call it my step one story, but it transpired over I can't say how long of a period of time, but several days at least. Um, didn't really have a good grasp on how much time was going by at that point in time. Time didn't mean much to me then. Uh, but just suffice to say, it got so dark that I hated myself and just wanted to die. And one of the things that I didn't think that it was possible that everything could be okay. I don't know, man, just overwhelmed and not so much the materialistic things, because I had reached the point where I didn't care about that anymore, man. I had lost that house we built and everything in it, and I was down to nothing materialistically to begin with. So none of that really mattered to me, but I never thought I could be okay with my family. And I had 3 teenage kids at this point, and no matter how bad of a father I became, and I did, I was a terrible father, but I still loved my kids deep down in my heart, and I knew I did. I just couldn't display it outwardly. And every time I would fail at that, I would hate myself a little bit more. And somewhere along in there, I got into an argument with my oldest son, and he told me to F off. He hoped he never saw me. And somewhere about that same time, my little daughter was 12 or 13, and I went to see her. She got home, and I walked out to the car, and she saw me and screamed and ran away. And of course, that just made me feel even that much worse. And y'all, I'm telling y'all, it was dark in that moment. If I would have had the courage to kill myself, I would have. I tried to pull out in front of an 18-wheeler a couple of times, and I would chicken out. Well, about that same time period, there was a man that lived across the street from my mother, which is where I was staying at that point, by the way. I had nowhere else to go. 40 years old and living at my mom's. Uh, and the man across the street had always lived there. His name was Bill, and he was like a second dad to me. And especially after my dad died. And so I loved that man so much. And he had Parkinson's, and he was kind of going downhill health wise, but he loved to sit out in his yard in the swing and talk. And I would avoid him. I would see him outside, and I wouldn't go outside. And really, I was ashamed. I hadn't nothing but shame when I saw him. There was no denying what I was. I mean, guys, I'm a pretty good sized fella. I weigh about 225 right now. And at that point, I weighed 160 pounds. Uh, and so I wouldn't go out and talk to Bill. Well, one day he called me, and I didn't have any choice but to go over and sit down and talk. And so I sat down with him, and he started asking me point blank. And, the craziest thing is probably the first time since all that started, I told the truth. I told him I didn't lie about who I was and what I had done. I mean, he knew anyway. But I poured my heart out to him, and I remember him saying, "What do you need?" And I thought for a long time, and I finally said, "I think I need somebody to believe in me. I think I need somebody to believe in me." And I got up and to leave, and he said, "Hey, I believe in you." And so that sets the stage. Sometime that night or the next day or so, I'm in my mom's house, and I had a little tin can that I kept all my things in, my paraphernalia in, syringes, roaches, whatever you can imagine's in there. And I go to get it down because I had it hidden, and I open it up and there's a letter in it from my 17-year-old son. Basically, very brief, just saying, hey, I'm one speaking for many, and we love you and we believe in you, and all can be forgiven. And I'd like to tell you all that, whoa, man, that, yes, that's all I needed to hear. And in a way it was, but in that moment in time, it felt like somebody picked up a sledgehammer and hit me in the guts. And what do we do when we get emotionally distraught? We go use. And so I went and acquired what I wanted, and I brought it home, and I did as much of it as I could. It was a very large amount. It should have really messed me up for a day or more, and I never felt it. I shot IV methamphetamines into my veins and never felt a thing. And I knew right then I was in trouble, because I remember thinking, man, the drugs don't even work anymore. So I went to bed and went to sleep. And in the middle of that sleep, my mom comes in. Could have been a few hours, could have been a couple of days. I couldn't tell you. And she said, hey, something's wrong with Bill. They can't get him on the gurney. They need you to go help. Bill was a great big guy. He was 6'4", probably 300 pounds. And I guess the EMTs were smaller people. And I just rolled over and went back to sleep. I remember her coming in and asking me, but I don't think it registered in that moment. I don't know. But I fell back asleep, and some point after that, I woke up, and the first thought I had was about Bill, and I ran in there and I asked my mom, hey, what about Bill? And she said, oh, he died. And she was really cold about it, and I think she was really pissed off that I didn't get up and go. And you know, y'all, I can't describe the feeling that I had at that moment, but it's like, sorry, I'm at work. Uh, it felt like the weight of the world just hit me all at once. And I took off running, and I ran out in the front yard, and I ran around the front yard for a minute. And I don't know what the hell I was doing, but I just plopped down right in the middle of the front yard looking over at Bill's house, and the dam broke. And I mean, it broke. And it came out of nowhere, and I cried and I sobbed. I mean, ugly cry is not even a strong enough description for what I did. I cried until I didn't have anything left to cry. And literally in that time period, my life passed before my eyes. And I saw my dad, and I saw my brother and sister, who had actually died to addiction, by the way. I left that part out. I saw my kids when they were little, and I saw all these visions of dreams that I had had. And I don't know how long I was there, but when I finished crying and gathered myself, I stood up and I felt light as a feather. Well, I mean, I know today I probably needed that cry for the last 25 years or whatever it was. And here's the realization that came to me. Out of all that I had gone through and all the hell, the final thought was, you know what? You can't keep doing drugs. You can't keep drinking. You've got to stop putting chemicals in your body. Now, you would think that I would have known that way back there. But our program says that the great obsession of every abnormal drinker is to think he can drink like his fellow man. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. And that was so me, man. I thought it was everything else and not the drinking, because, hey, remember way back when I said I got away with it? remember when I lived this really great life and had great money and I was successful by all accounts while I was still drinking. It must not be the alcohol or the dope. It's got to be the circumstances. And I held on to that to the bitter end until I finally realized, dude, you've got to stop. And I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But at that moment, God relieved me of that obsession that I couldn't control anymore. And I haven't used since then. And I call my sobriety date September the 22nd of 08 because that was the date, that was Bill's death date. I don't know if that's exactly right or not, but it's close enough and I'll never forget it. And I walked in the house and I told my mom, hey, I need to go to an AA meeting. And I started going to AA. And I went and I didn't know anywhere else to go or anything else to do. That was just the one place that I felt accepted and loved. And I knew I was safe for that hour that I was at a meeting. And somebody told me right off the bat, man, put as much effort into getting clean as you did getting high. And I said, well, man, that's 24/7, 365, right? And he said, yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I know today, man, that if I was willing to do whatever it took to get wasted, then I better be willing to do whatever it takes to get clean and stay clean. And right off the bat, those people sucked. They took me in, man. And I remember one of the first meetings, a lady said, we'll love you till you can love yourself. Man, that sounded so good to me because I had stopped loving myself. I didn't even think anybody could ever love me again. I'm too damaged, broken. I've done too much, man. And at that point, I really wasn't thinking too much about restoring my life. I was just knew I couldn't keep using and drinking. And, you know, I sat and I listened to those people, man. And if you're hopeless, if you've worked step one and you're truly powerless and you're in that dark, what Bill Wilson called it, the bitter morass of quicksand that stretches before me, man, that describes it so perfectly where I was at. If you're there, man, you will cling to the most littlest pieces of hope. And those people had something, man. And I couldn't argue with that. I could argue with anybody in the world. You could come to me and say, man, I had cancer and I prayed and God relieved me of my cancer. And I'd say, well, big deal, man, I don't have cancer. Good for you. I got alcoholism. I got this crazy disease, man. And I need to know that I can get better from that. And I got around those people and I started listening to their stories, and man, they sounded just as screwed up and crazy and pain, in as much pain as I was, and they were better. And at first I tried not to believe them, you know, because I came out of a world where everything was a lie to begin with. And it took me some time. And I remember sitting in a meeting and I look up at the steps and I think, man, that's the stupidest crap I've ever read in my life. I waited all these years to hear what the 12 steps were. And that's what it is. That's it. That's all you got. And I would make fun of them, and I would, you know, it was that my addiction talking to me, telling me this is bullshit, don't do it. And then one day it was like a light went off. I can go show you the exact place I was sitting in that meeting that night. And they said, man, these people are living really good lives and they're happy. They got new vehicles and jobs and they look good, and you're still wearing clothes that you stole from Goodwill, and you're miserable. How dare you question how they're doing? And that night, that opened my eyes, and I thought, you know what? Okay, they keep saying if you do what I do, you'll get what I got. And I said, all right, I'm gonna do it. So I picked out one guy, and I went to him. He was kind of the leader of the group, so to speak. And he was really wise and had great stuff to say. And he'd been sober for 20 something years, and he had his own company, and he had just bought a brand new Harley Fat Boy, and I'd watch him ride that motorcycle, and just the sound would just give me chills, you know. And that was so attractive to me, and I wanted what he had. And I walked up to him and I asked him, all right, man, you said if I do what you did, I'll get what you got. What do I do? How'd you do this? And he said, God. I said, I knew it. I knew there was a catch. I knew this program was crap. I knew it. And I start to walk out the door. And he said, "What's your problem?" I said, "I'll tell you what my problem is, dude. I'm dying. That's my problem. And I need a solution. And all you got for me is a book full of miracles." I said, "Bro, don't come at me with that, man. I've been hearing that stuff all my life. I was raised, my mother was diehard Southern Baptist. I have had it crammed down my throat. I have prayed 10 million times. I'm not sitting around and waiting on some miracle to happen. You're crazy. I've got better odds of winning the lottery." I said, "Man, I know about Moses parting the Red Sea and, Jesus fed 5,000 people with 2 fish and Lazarus rose from the dead." I said, "No, don't give me that crap, man." And he said, "No, man, you don't need a God to do all that stuff. You just need a God to keep you sober." How you going to argue with that? Couldn't stay sober. That was clear. And so I said, "Okay, man, you got me there. What do I do?" And he said, "Just go home and ask God to help you stay sober today. Don't ask for him to restore your life." I said, "But I don't know what I think about God." He said, "It don't matter. Just pray to God. You can believe that I believe, don't you?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, I guess I can believe that." And he said, "Just pray to God. Don't ask him to give you everything again, man. Just ask him to keep you from getting drunk tonight. And if you get to the end of the day and you didn't get drunk, well, thank him for it." And I said, I'll try it. Part of me wanted to prove him wrong, but what I really wanted was for him to be right. So I went home and I started praying. "God, help me stay clean today. Help me stay sober." And every night I tried to remember to thank him for keeping me clean and sober. And I woke up 90 days clean and sober. And I sat up on the side of the bed and I thought, "Man, I'm getting this 90-day chip, man. I'm fixing to go show this to my mom." And I was going to AA and NA back then because I was hitting every meeting I could hit, right? And I was going to get me a key tag and a chip, boy. And man, yeah, I couldn't wait to show everybody. And all of a sudden it hit me. "Dude, you've been clean 90 days. That's a miracle." Yeah, yeah, that's a real miracle. I don't know if it's a miracle to you guys, but it's a miracle to me. I know I was there. I couldn't stay clean 90 minutes. And I've been clean 90 days. And I remember just the revelation, man, was like, wow, man, if God can work that miracle, who am I to say that these other miracles didn't happen? And that opened that door for me. Remember Bill said all I had to do was be willing to believe. And that moment made me willing, man. That's my favorite line in the whole big book is circumstances made us willing to believe. Love that, man. I needed some circumstances. I needed some that were tangible. And I needed you guys to show me that, man. I needed to see hope through y'all, that y'all had a terrible, miserable life and you got better. And I needed to see that miracle for myself. Now, the beautiful part is my addictive nature. Once I found something that made me feel that good, I couldn't get enough of it. And y'all, I have launched into recovery as wholeheartedly as I did addiction. And, maybe I've gotten addicted to that. I'm okay with that. I have a theory that addicts are always going to be addicted to something. It's our nature. We get obsessed about things, man. I don't think we're really that much different than everybody in society. Everybody's obsessed about something. It's just usually it's not something that destroys homes and families and rips people apart, right? So I started going along there and I worked the steps with all my heart, all my soul. I did it as good as I could. And it was beautiful. You guys that have worked the steps know, man, it was amazing. And my life started getting better and I started to like myself again. I thought back to that lady saying, "We'll love you till you can love yourself." And I started to love me again. Maybe I loved me for the first time in my life. Really loved me, not loved the superficial me that I knew was a bunch of bullshit, that I wasn't anybody's hero and I wasn't all American and I wasn't any more special than any other dude. But I had held that facade for so long and I couldn't maintain it. So that, that was that fake hope, or that fake security, and now I had real security for the first time. And I got involved in I actually had a friend that came in and off the streets, and he said, "Man, I've been watching you, and if you can get clean and sober, anybody can get clean and sober, and you're my sponsor." And just like that, I was a sponsor. And I'm happy to report that today, almost 14 years later, he's still clean. And so I have a golden success with my first sponsee. I wish I could say that about all my sponsees, but at least I got that one that far. Uh, but when I realized that I had something worth giving, that I had something to give back, then all of a sudden I wanted more of that, right? I found out that I love to help people. Who knew? Who knew? And I couldn't have told you about something I didn't understand, but I understood addiction. And I understood what it was like to be that miserable. And I understood how to pass that hope on. There's not to get deep into to God or scripture here, but there's a scripture where the man's relieved of demons and felt like I felt like I was relieved of demons, and he wanted to go with Jesus, and Jesus said, "No, you got to stay here and tell people what God did for you." And that hit me, man. I can tell people what God did for me. And so I started doing that, man. And I started doing some H&I to a facility, a residential treatment facility for adolescents, not too far from where I live. We'll go out on Tuesday nights and take a meeting to those kids. And that was fun for a little while. It was unique seeing these kids. But after a while, it started getting old, man. They're not very well behaved. You can imagine a 40 or 50 teenage drug addicts ripped out of their home and taking their drug taken away from them. They're not the best behaved kids. So I thought that was disrespectful, and I thought, man, I'll never see them again. I don't know if I'm helping anybody or not. And I had literally made up my mind I was done, that this was my last night I was going out there. And we got through with the meeting, and I started to walk out the door, and this kid comes running up to me out of nowhere. And he just grabs a hold of me like a bear, and he said, "Man, you gave me hope." I gave you hope? Me? And that hit a button right there and that lit a fire that's never quit burning. That I found out that I could help. And today I have gone back to school and become a licensed counselor, and I work at that facility. And I've been counseling out here since 2012, and I love working with kids. That's my passion. And I've worked in other facilities too for adults, and I enjoy working with adults too. But my heart and soul is with kids, and so I've been doing that since 2012. And while I was out here, I started trying to see what kids needed. Why are kids not getting the help that they need? And I realized, man, they don't like going to meetings with a bunch of old people. I mean, if you really think about it, to them, adults are nothing but authority, and they're kind of the enemy. And I thought, man, they need a meeting just for them. And I started thinking about that, and through a lot of different things, I came up with a group. A youth pastor kept pushing me, and he said, "Man, I need some help with some of these kids I got that are cutting and they're self-harm, and they're sending naked pictures out, and I need some help." And I knew that my program was what I needed. That had already been laid on my heart. And so I said, "Okay, let's do it." And we started having a meeting in 2014, and it's called Breakout, and it's been growing ever since. And it consumes almost all of my time outside of my regular job here at Sundown, but I love it. We've grown into a nonprofit. I have no idea what we're going to do with that nonprofit. I know what I want to do, but right now we're just trying to get some funding and get some people to back us. And we're writing a business plan, and I want to go into the schools and get my program on campus. Some of these, I don't know what they call it where you guys are from, but they call it DEAP here. And it's, if a kid gets caught in trouble, then it's like suspension. They put them in this program, and they're just there all day long, going to school on a computer, and they just sort of sit in a cubicle. And I don't know, man, maybe a football coach sits in there with them or something. They're just not getting a lot of schooling, and those kids are slipping through the cracks. And I see that in Breakout, and I work with some juvenile probation now, and I deal with a lot of those kids, and I see them here at sundown, and we have a contract with Child Protective Services, and so we get a lot of those kids, and I get a chance to see these broken kids and what they need, and they need somebody to believe in them. They need somebody to give them some hope, and they need somebody to let them be a kid and find their way through this mess and not beat them down every time they do something wrong. They already don't know who they are. They already don't like themselves. Most of them are struggling with depression and all that stuff, and it's heartbreaking. And that just fuels my fire. And so I'm going to get on these campuses, and I actually recently started carrying meetings out to a residential placement center for girls that are in the foster system, and it's pretty amazing to get to be a part of that. And my life has been blessed beyond anything that I could have ever dreamed. That who would have known I could have given back and had something of value to people, that I could actually have a purpose in life. And that's our steps, right? That's 12. That's step 12, man. That's what it's all about. Nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with alcoholics. Nothing. That's a pretty bold statement for the big book, because it doesn't make a lot of dogmatic statements. Nothing. And sure enough, that's how it is. If I go out and I give of myself to those people, man, I don't have to wallow in my own self-pity, because guess what? Everything that made me an addict is still in my head. And I get those same crazy, stupid thoughts. I'm still a big baby. I still whine when I don't get my way. I pout and I go off, and when I don't get the attention that I want from pouting, and I really get sad, and I still have this, I have to fight that every day, man. I still have to deal with this program. But helping addicts really helps me do that. And so I still run about 4 meetings a week, and stay heavily involved with kids and counsel kids here and counsel kids outside of there. And I still have a sponsor and a couple of men that I call accountability buddies, and I talk to them daily. And I still have to run things by them, and they still have to talk me down off the ledge pretty regular, because I guess I'm always going to have that kind of thinking that's going to derail me if I'm not careful. And so I'll kind of sum it up with this: how I continue to move forward. Every day is another victory, right? And I feel that much better about myself, because, hey, last year I had stayed clean and sober for 13 years. Well, now I can brag a little more, because I've been clean and sober 14 years. And every day is a victory, because I still know that every day I can get high. And I wake up every morning and I work step one. It's the very first thing I do before I get out of bed. And every day I tell myself, you know what, if you don't do everything you're supposed to do, you could end up at the beer store. You could end up at the dope house. All it's going to take is for me to start getting emotionally eroded again and spiritually eroded again, and then the right presentation, and I'm in trouble, because there are still plenty of things in this world that I'm not very good at saying no to. And so I wake up and I work step one, and I'm fully aware that life's going to come at me today. That this program has taught me how to live life on life's terms, meaning whatever comes at me, I'm going to deal with it today, and I'm going to push through it, and I'm going to come out the other side, and I'm going to be okay. It may hurt like hell in the middle of it, but I'll get through it. I came through at the end, and I understood this program the most when my mother passed away. I've been clean about 2.5 years, and she had already buried 2 kids to addiction. She almost buried her baby boy, and I got to give her 2.5 years clean and sober, which is still, I think, my greatest contribution to life. But I made it through that whole process. Now, my mom was the love of my life, just being honest, and it crushed me when she died. It was horrible. The whole thing was terrible. But I made it through that, and I held on to this program. I held on to my spiritual connection, and I didn't get high. I didn't get drunk. And when I realized that I made it through the worst thing I'm ever going to go through without losing it, I know without a doubt, as long as I work my program, I'm going to be okay. So wherever you're at in this deal, man, commit to it with all your heart. Do it every day. You can't take a bath yesterday and be clean tomorrow. You got to keep on doing this thing. And I promise you it's worth it. I promise you that you're going to achieve things that you never knew were true. Bill W. called it the fourth dimension. And look here, boy, the addict in me wanted to go to the fourth dimension. Okay, that's where I'm going there. And so I'll tell you what, I found it. And that fourth dimension is living in a world where no matter what the circumstances are, I don't have to get drunk. Thank you.